it felt like stuff was leaving our house. It's kind of weird feeling, like the presence of something was leaving. And stuff like that happened a few times. Whenever we had like an issue going on, you called her, declared it in Jesus' name that his foot would be healed. About 15 minutes later, he came back over after the line started up and we were working. He's like, dude.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody wanting to start off at any level of this process?
I'll say some of the easier things to grow if you're just starting. And our kids running around in the background doing cartwheels and farting while we're videoing. That stuff happens all the time. You never know what's going to happen when you post something on social media. And then I had a guy come in. He said, you need to take every piece of plaster out of this house. I ran into my corn trying to spook out whatever it was so I could just totally light it up. And I jumped in there. And when I landed, I looked around with a flashlight all around me. Like I jumped into the middle of a whole family of.
Oh, no. Hey, this is Matt with the Charting Life podcast. Before we get into the show, I just want to make a quick announcement. I'm wanting to experiment and try something different. I've had some feedback, and I know the full-length podcast can be a bit too much for some. For the next few episodes, I will release segments of the episode on YouTube. Just search Charting Life Podcast like you would anywhere else you get your podcast. These will upload before the full episode is released, wherever you would normally get your podcast. So YouTube's going to have shorter segments, and the full podcast be on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you like to get your podcast. I would love to know if this is something you like. You can always reach me at chartinglifepodcast@gmail.com. And I want to sincerely thank you for listening to the show and coming back for more. This show is something that has been on my heart and on my mind for some time, and I am thrilled to make this a reality. I hope this show encourages you, makes you laugh, and inspires you to chart your own island. Now back to the show. I guess, so what's made you kind of inspired you to start the channel? And then what are you hoping to achieve, especially now that you have more following than just friends and family? What started you down that path?
So we, really what got us started in gardening and stuff, it started, 20 some years ago, and Stephanie's grandparents were big gardeners and they did a lot of stuff. And, when you're in your 20s, you don't really pay a lot of attention to that. That's just an old people hobby. It's old people doing old people stuff. At least that's right. How it was, back in the early, late 1990s, early 2000s. I didn't pay much attention to grandparents, what they were up to. I was just trying to have fun and enjoy my life and get my home life started. And one day, it was just me and Stephanie. We hadn't had any kids yet. We stopped at one of these little guys on the side of the road that sell corn. And I got some corn from this guy. And it was like, cotton candy or something like that. I can't remember what kind it was. But after eating that, it revolutionized the way I was looking at food. Like, I was so used to, like, my family they were just making it. And, I didn't like a lot of food. I was super picky because they just got some basic stuff that most people got, and I didn't like it, And after eating that corn, I was like, I want to grow my own corn because that was 1,000 times better than anything I ever had at the grocery store. And that got me in starting a garden in a little bitty small backyard. I was growing corn, like just, 50 little ears of corn. And of course, the first year I did it, it failed miserably. And the second year I did it, it got a little better, but still was. And then like I got worms, and I finally got like some good corn, like the third year. And I opened it up, and it was full of worms. So then I'm calling Stephanie's grandpa because I'm like, this dude's a gardener. I'm going to figure out what's going on. And he's like, of course, he had all the tricks. He's like, put a little bit of castor oil or some kind of, vegetable oil, and put a paper bag over it to keep raccoons out of it. He had all these this old timers kind of tricks on. And this was like, I was speaking his language. Me and him were just suddenly like, I'll teach you. He was like, I'll teach you how to grow some corn. And we just started gardening after that, and it just kept growing every year. We started doing strawberries. We started doing okra, and just, our whole backyard was just a garden and we had, the dog was like didn't have nowhere to run because it was a garden back there.
Yeah, I gotta say, there's one story that I love it, and I use it. Again, as youth pastor here, I've used it several times as a illustration. But there was a point where your dog got into one of the vegetables and got ate. So you didn't know what it was, but he pooped in the yard.
Yeah.
And you just, pumpkin. You waited, however long it was, a few weeks or whatever, and then you could see that he ate a pumpkin seed, and that sprouted where he defecated.
Yes, it was funny. Yeah, we just let it grow too. It was his pumpkin. So he got into a pumpkin, like one of the old pumpkins that we had, and he ate it. And then we had pumpkins growing in the middle of the yard. It was pretty funny, and they grew into big, nice, pretty pumpkins. And I'm like, that's his pumpkins. Those are for him. He grew them.
That's like a good unexpected win there.
Yeah. But so Stephanie's grandparents, like they finally got too old to even garden, and really when we had become really good at gardening at that point. We had been doing it for 15, 16 years, or I don't even know, but we had more than we knew what to do with, and we were growing it. We just had learned what to do right, and we were growing a lot of vegetables. And when you start, it starts off like whatever you get into, it usually starts off with like corn. The next thing you know, we have cucumbers, strawberries, apples, and we just have tons and tons of all this produce that's all coming in. And so then it's like, well, what do you do with it? You got to start preserving it, and it starts this domino effect of, I got apple butter and jams and pickles that I'm making, and we were just doing all this stuff, but we were also working our regular jobs. And when COVID hit, everybody, the whole world just kind of stopped, and a lot of people, we didn't know what to do. So I was still working at my dad's nursery, because that place didn't, for some reason it was okay for outside places to be open. But Stephanie was still, like, she was teaching the kids. She was trying to do the NTI. We were all trying to figure that out. But she was watching YouTube videos, and she just stumbled across some of these channels that were doing what we do. And it was really inspiring, because we were learning a lot from these people. Because I would come home from work, and she's like, you got to see what what they're doing with chickens here, and how easy it is to build this coop. And that was about 3 years ago that we really started. I started like building stuff and going beyond just a backyard hobby garden to now we have chickens. And it kind of avalanches too. It's one of those things where once you start doing chickens, it's just like now you have eggs. And while you already have chickens, you might as well process them, and then you'll have your own meat. And you just keep going. It just keeps growing to, now we want a dairy cow. We want pigs now. We're still got more stuff in the works that we're just planning on doing. And I think our goal, like when we started doing it, it was more, like, it has always just been kind of like a documentary for our family and our kids. But it's also to help our friends and family, or anyone who is interested in gardening and homesteading and canning and processing their own stuff. And somehow it's created a little bit of a side hustle, small income coming in. And so that's great. I'm not going to complain. If you can make money, I would rather make money doing that, something that I really enjoy, than working in a factory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not cut out for factory work. The repetition, I know some people can do it, some people can't, and I'm certainly on the can't side of that. Yeah, so if you've not checked out any other videos, I definitely recommend checking out Grain Free Homestead. And at the end, we'll get all the details. But one of the things that's interesting is the house that you guys have. And I think, like you mentioned, you're doing like this almost kind of serves as a documentary for your family. And in a way, that certainly can kind of leave a legacy for your kids and grandkids and on down the line. Similar to how the house that you guys have now is part of a legacy of Stephanie's family, right?
Right.
And so if you watch a lot of the videos, you see a lot of the progress. You guys are renovating this house. Why don't you give like a brief little update of like what's going on, and then is there any other behind the scenes type of stuff that maybe you've not revealed on the on your channel, that like any other like updates, that sort of stuff?
So we Stephanie's grandma, her grandpa passed away right before COVID hit, and his family had lived, like, I'm trying to think how far back. We went and looked at the records of the house. It was built in, well, we weren't able to go any further back than 1890 because it was all chicken scratch, and it was really, really hard to tell what people had written and like the boundary lines of the property, because they were like, there's a rock and a pine tree, and that was their marker at the time, which, you know, made sense back then, but now it's to the point that it's hard to tell how far back beyond that it went. So we dated it back to 1890, and that I'm trying to think of who it was. I think his name was William Crumbacker, and it went to the house just stayed in their family for years, and when, you know, somebody wasn't able to have any kids, they would leave it to a niece or a nephew, and usually stayed in the nephew. So that family was pretty big back in the area we live in, and it ended up going to Stephanie's great grandma, and then her son JD bought it, and then when JD passed away, his wife lived there until she passed away, which was Josephine. Those are both Stephanie's grandparents, JD and Josephine. And then Stephanie's mom inherited it, and they weren't able to keep it. It was just, at that point, you know, the house is 100 and almost 50 years old, and it needed a lot of work. So they tried to sell it, and we were at the same time thinking about, you know, we're over there with a huge garden and chickens, and we need more property. And Stephanie she grew up real close to that house, and it's always been like the center of her family. All the, you know, every Easter they had a huge Easter egg hunt there, and she had a lot of emotional attachment to the house, and it was a big deal. And it would be horrible for her and a lot of her family to see that house, you know, just get tore down and a new subdivision put up.
Right.
So we were able to get the house, and we started. Well, it was funny is, you know, we did kind of like a walkthrough inspection and everything on what the house was going to be, like what we could afford to do and what needed to be done to make the house work for us. There was stuff that we could have just left, but, you know, a family of 5 with 1 bathroom isn't going to work. Yeah. And having no bathroom on the second floor wasn't going to work. So we had to figure out, you know, and then we noticed that, you know, some of the walls had cracks in them that was all plaster. So we were like, I had no idea how to do a lot of this stuff. And so I called in friends, family, people who do this stuff professionally and just asked for, you know, what do I need to do? And my plan was to take down 1 or 2 walls that had cracks in them that were real bad, because, I talked to a guy. He's like, we can patch this, but it's crack and it's going to just keep coming back. He said, so he recommended, you know, taking it down. So then I was like, okay, we'll take down 2 or 3 walls. And then I had a guy come in. He said, you need to take every piece of plaster out of this house. And there was all these, like, my plan and, you know, how much it's going to cost, and then the reality of what really needed to be done. So it was just always like these big overwhelming things would hit with the house. We also had to move, like, we sold our house, and we had to move all our stuff, and we didn't have nowhere really to put it because the house needed renovating. So we just shoved everything in boxes and put it in garages and just space that we could find. And then we were all in one room. There was like a little, Stephanie's great grandpa lived there when he needed like medical help. And they created like a little mother-in-law suite kind of thing, I guess. Like it was.
Okay, yeah, he's gonna have the extra whole little.
Yeah, he had his own little apartment on there. So we spent, like, that was our kitchen. That was where Isaac slept. And then we had Sam and Hannah in the living room with us. So we had to get the living room set up and then start renovating. I do not recommend doing that ever. I mean, everyone tells us you're gonna love this when it's done, but we're a year into this now, and it is super super stressful and super hard on our family. But at the same time, it's worth doing for us. It's totally, we love it and we hate it at the same time, and we've had to deal with stuff that just normal homes aren't used to dealing with. If you want to go eat in the wintertime, you have to go out of the house down to the apartment where where the little tiny kitchen is.
Yeah. If
just the logistics of,
Yeah.
of living in it. If you needed to take a shower, there was only one shower, and we were used to having multiple bathrooms with all these kids, and you have trying to take a shower and you have kids banging on the door. You lose almost all your privacy.
Yeah.
And it's been a struggle, but it's also been a great reward. We tearing out walls, we found like old marbles that were in the floors. And it's
Nice.
like, this is cool because this is like probably one of Stephanie's great grandpas was playing with marbles when he was a kid, and they rode underneath the floor joist, underneath, behind the wall. We found so many snake skins. It is snakes that, old farmhouses. I learned a lot, I didn't realize how many snakes. Old farmhouses are surrounded by fields. And when it gets cold, all the mice run to the farmhouse to stay warm. So a lot of farmers are very happy to have, rat snakes, just black snakes on their property, in their barns, all around.
Right. Some of the non-venomous ones preferably.
You don't.
Yeah, not too invasive.
Right. Well, and the guys went up into the attic and they were like, I've never seen so many snake skins in my life. And he pulled out like 12 or 15 snake skins. They were all big. And we're just kind of like, oh, I guess that's from a long time ago. That's probably old.
That's the hope.
And then literally every wall we took out, every ceiling we took out, there was snake skin in it.
Mm-mm.
And it was everywhere. And then we started finding some snakes, outside, which it doesn't bother me. I'm okay with it. It was kind of weird having them like in your walls, in your house. Wouldn't want that, but being outside around the house or in the crawl spaces and stuff, it's just when they get into your. Her grandma had said something before that there was a snake that had came out of the one of the walls, like a hole in the wall, and nobody believed her. And I'm like, she wasn't lying. I know because I've seen all the snake skins. We actually found a snake that had like in the little cellar that holds some of the under the house. And that's just where they chill out. I mean, that's for the wintertime, they hibernate under there. That doesn't bother me, but a lot of people probably wouldn't. One of the things that I'm going to get this old farmhouse and fix it up. Yeah, you're going to have to deal with a lot of stuff you don't, there's termites, there's snakes, it's not all the pretty picture you see a lot of times when people, you have a show where they're like, we're taking this old home and renovating it into this amazing, modern farmhouse, and they don't show you all the dirty details of what was behind the walls.
Yeah, that's honestly, that almost sounds like a great like sitcom.
Yeah,
like just your whole situation. You got your homesteading thing. You're doing your social media. You go into this house. You realize there's so much more. You find out that the grandma's not crazy because the snake really did probably come out of the wall.
Yeah,
that's like if somehow, some way, someone gets a hold of this, like
they made a movie. Tom Hanks made a movie called Money Pit where he bought this old house, and it literally was everything was breaking and falling apart. And it does kind of remind me of our house. We love it at the same time because it's got so much family history, and I love old things, the windows, the doors, the doorknobs, the woodwork in the house. You can't buy that stuff anymore. Some guy went in there and notched out literally thousands of little pieces of wood to get the woodwork trim. It wasn't done in a factory with a machine that just pops it out like every half second. Yeah, this guy went in there with a little chisel and worked all day on this. So the time and energy put into it is just we really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when you get into handmade or hand done.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's nice to have the supply of mass produce that sort of stuff, but the quality is definitely
Right. Yeah, the quality is
better.
amazing.
So is there like a myth about homesteading or gardening that's stuff that you guys are doing? Is there a myth about that you think you could probably debunk and kind of help bring some clarity to?
Yeah, the when we were watching YouTube videos, we saw a lot of, I don't know, you see all the, and a lot of people do this just on Facebook and normally. You see all the highlights, you see all this amazing stuff. You see like, this is what I want. You see a cabin and there's a pool and a waterfall next to it, and you don't see the hard work that goes into it. You don't see like, so with gardening, I'll grow a 30-pound watermelon and I'll take a picture of it and post it on Facebook. And it's, Sam holding a 30-pound watermelon. Mm-hmm. And everyone is like, this is amazing. How did you do it? I want to do that. Well, it took me 10 years to be able to figure out what kind of watermelon that and how to get it growing right. Even now, 10 of those watermelons failed and 10 of them didn't. And there's a lot of failure. No one, we try and do it a lot, but, people don't like seeing that kind of stuff too. They want to see, the 10 bushels of tomatoes that you just picked. They don't want to see the diseased, the ones that have bugs on them and the ones that are gross and rotten. And there's a lot of that goes on. You go and pick tomatoes, you're gonna get a lot of them that are rotten and your hand's gonna go through. There's gonna be squirrels that chewed holes in them and they're gross, and you're just gonna throw them in the compost pile. The compost pile is something that people don't like to show because it's rotting, decaying material turning back into dirt. It's dead animals and poop,
Right. Yeah.
And people don't see that the eggs that you get have chicken poop on them, and they don't like to see that. They want to see, the blue and the green and the white and brown pretty eggs. And that's what you see, is you see this myth of this beautiful bowl full of eggs that, somebody just picked out of, just got out of the coop. And it's like, there's no way those eggs are covered in poop. You had to wash your hands. You have poop on your shoes. You have poop everywhere. It's everywhere. It's not a clean. And you see these farmhouses where there's no laundry. Everything is just picture perfect. And it's a fantasy of a lot of people. They do it with everything, and they do it with homesteading, and they make you think that, hey, your life will be perfect and you'll love it. You'll sit around and drink coffee all day, and your eggs are just, everything will be perfect. There's a fantasy. And I think that, Stephanie even got caught up in that for a while where, she thought it was all it's going to be this, sitting on the porch drinking coffee and enjoying my cow moo off in the distance. And, but you got to get up every morning and you got to feed all the animals and you got to take care of it. And in the wintertime when it's -7, you still got to feed the animals. And then you got water that's frozen, and you got to figure out how to get water that's not frozen or that won't blow up a water line. You're going to spend hours we got some cold temperatures here a few weeks ago. And we literally, just to keep our chickens alive, had to like fortify their coop and bring in more straw and, just set up. It was a lot more work. We had to get buckets of hot water from inside and carry them outside and bust out ice. And we broke one of the doors on the coop trying to even get it open because it was covered in ice. There's all this work that you don't see people doing. You just see the highlight reel. So understanding that this isn't going to be super easy, that myth of everything's perfect, it's work. It's a lot of work.
And I'll let you answer, but I'm assuming that because you guys are still doing this so many years later and keep expanding, even with all the work, you say you think it's worth it?
It really depends on the type of person you are. If you are someone who appreciates, a fresh egg, if you are a person who appreciates a steak that came from a cow, that what it was eating and the quality of that meat, or you can go buy a tomato that was grown in a greenhouse at the grocery store, and the taste of it is going to be different than what I get in August on my tomato vines. So if it doesn't bother you to eat, different, I consider it a lower quality food. I'm not trying to it's a factory processed, get it out there as quick as you can. It looks good. And if that's okay with you, then I wouldn't even suggest doing homesteading. But if you go and you try some sweet corn and you notice that it's a lot different from what the quality of the taste is so much better than what you would get at a grocery store, then yeah, start looking into what else you have that the quality could be better. It's more about, it's going to cost more. It's going to cost more time. You appreciate more expensive food whenever you grow it. Like, people pay like 99 cents or $1, $2 for a dozen eggs at the grocery store. And then they'll go to a farmer's market and they'll have a dozen eggs for $4. And they're like, I can go to the grocery store and get the same thing. It's like, well, you're not really getting the same thing. Mm-hmm. The quality is a lot different. There's factories that have chickens in cages, and they give them hormones and feed them certain kinds of feed, and it's a certain breed of chicken, and all it does is it doesn't move. It's just in a cage dropping eggs. It's like a machine, and that's what it is. Whereas my chickens, I go out there, they have a better quality of life, and they have beautiful eggs. When you crack open an egg from a grocery store, it is like a light yellow, and it's usually you don't even notice it until you compare it next to a farm-raised egg. And when you see the difference in the quality and you taste the difference, some people say they can't taste the difference, but just knowing that to me, it's more of a real egg. It's a more of a natural process versus just somebody with an industrial machine producing as many eggs as quick as they can to make a profit versus someone who is growing chickens in their backyard, and the chickens are eating grass and bugs, and they're free ranging, and their chickens got a better quality egg. And it's the same with almost anything else in homesteading, anything like that. It's better quality.
Yeah, so quality definitely is good. And then again, what you're eating, there's lots of people talking about with the stuff that's in your food and all sort of stuff, and you have a lot more certainty when you're growing it yourself. Well, let me ask you, probably the last question on the homesteading is, if somebody wanted to start off, maybe it's just a garden, maybe they're starting small, what kind of advice would you give them? Maybe something that's easy to plant, or like what stuff that is maybe not common knowledge? Like what kind of advice would you give to somebody wanting to start off at any level of this process?
So the first thing is you're going to fail. You're going to have some major failures, and